The words hung in the air, sharp and brittle, like shards of ice. You will regret this. You will absolutely, unequivocally regret this. I'll see to it. Her voice, usually laced with that syrupy sweetness that hit a core of pure steel, was raw with fury. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, the facade crumbled. I saw the entitlement, the absolute certainty that the world, and by extension, I, owed her everything. My carefully constructed dam, built over years of quiet erosion, finally burst. My life had been a tapestry woven with threads of obligation, knotted tight by her anxieties and expectations. Even now, at 32, with my own comfortable apartment, a decent job, and a life that felt, for the most part, my own, the tendrils of her influence were deeply embedded. It wasn't about grand gestures or overt control. It was the subtle drip, drip, drip of guilt, the sigh that said if only you'd, the well-timed phone call during a crucial work meeting that always managed to coincide with a minor crisis she needed me to solve. My father, a good man but perpetually worn down, had always been the buffer. Since his passing 2 years ago, the mantle had fallen squarely on my shoulders, a responsibility I'd shouldered with a grim, silent resignation. She lived in the house, the one that had been my childhood sanctuary, now a monument to a life I no longer inhabited. It was filled with the ghosts of family dinners, scraped knees, and hushed arguments. After Dad died, the house, and its considerable upkeep, became a burden. A burden I'd willingly taken on, not out of love for the bricks and mortar, but out of a deep-seated desire to honor his memory and, if I'm honest, to keep tethered to something tangible. The payments, initially, were small, a way to cover utilities, the occasional repair. Then they grew, as her lifestyle, unfettered by the practicalities of earning a living, expanded. She had a knack for finding things to improve or replace that never seemed to make the house any more functional, only more gilded. I remembered the time I'd saved for months, scrimping and saving from my first real job, to buy my father a watch for his birthday. It wasn't extravagant, a simple stainless steel piece, but it meant the world to me. I presented it to him, beaming, and he loved it. Later that evening, I overheard her on the phone to her sister, her voice dripping with mock concern. Oh, bless him, he does try. But honestly, it's so basic. Dad deserves something with a bit more flair, don't you think? I'll have to have a little chat with him about gifts. The casual dismissal, the assumption that my efforts were somehow inadequate, lodged itself in my throat like a permanent splinter. Another time, during a particularly rough patch at work, I'd confided in her about my financial stress. I was living paycheck to paycheck, trying to get a crucial project off the ground. She'd listened, nodding sympathetically, then a few days later, out of the blue, she'd announced she'd help me out. I'd been so relieved, so grateful. She'd then proceeded to lend me a sum of money, with the casual caveat that I'd pay her back when things are good. The interest rate she'd calculated, with a cheerful wave of her hand, was astronomical, effectively doubling the amount within a year. When I finally managed to pay it back, 2 years later, she'd accepted the check with a sniff, as if I'd been a charity case. The underlying message was clear: I was perpetually in her debt, always needing her benevolent intervention. The final straw, the one that snapped the last thread of my patience, happened on a Tuesday morning. The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of burnt toast and unspoken resentment. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. I'd been meticulous. Every bill paid on time, every repair documented, every penny accounted for. And then, the notification. A direct debit had failed. A significant one. The one that covered the mortgage on the house. She was at the kitchen table, meticulously polishing a silver tea set I knew she never used, a small, smug smile playing on her lips. She looked up as I entered, her eyes glinting with a peculiar satisfaction. "Oh, hello, darling," she chirped, her voice infuriatingly light. "Have you checked your accounts?" I already had. My stomach had plummeted. "What happened?" I asked, my voice deliberately even, fighting the rising tide of panic. She set down a silver spoon, her movements deliberate, almost theatrical. Well, it seems you've forgotten. Forgotten what? The mortgage, dear. It didn't go through. She picked up another spoon, twirling it between her fingers. I suppose you've been a bit distracted lately? My breath hitched. The blood drained from my face. The mortgage payment was scheduled for yesterday. I transferred the funds. Her smile widened, a predatory gleam in her eyes. Ah, yes. But you see, I took care of something more pressing. A little investment opportunity. Very exciting. Needed a bit of capital, you see. I assumed you wouldn't mind a small delay. The world tilted. You used the mortgage money? My voice was a strangled whisper. The implications hit me with the force of a physical blow. Foreclosure. Eviction. The loss of everything my father had worked for, everything I had tried to preserve. She waved a dismissive hand, the silver spoon clattering onto the table. Don't be dramatic, darling. It's just a slight inconvenience. I'll sort it out. Eventually. You're always so worried about these little things. Really, you need to learn to relax. Relax? My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't a slight inconvenience. This was a betrayal. Pure, unadulterated, calculated betrayal. She had gambled with my financial stability, with the very roof over her own head, without a second thought, assuming I would simply absorb the fallout. Her audacity was breathtaking. The casualness with which she'd revealed her actions, the way she'd framed it as my own oversight, was chilling. You took the money, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She finally met my gaze, her eyes hard and unwavering. I did what I had to do. And you, my dear, will be paying for it. You have a responsibility to me. To this family. And if you think you can just stop your payments now, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. You will regret this. You will absolutely, unequivocally regret this. I'll see to it. The threat, bald and naked, hung in the air. Disownment. Not just a threat, but a promise. The power imbalance, always present, was now laid bare. She believed she held all the cards. She believed I would crumble, beg, and placate her. She believed I was still the dependent child who needed her approval, her provision. But the years of silent endurance, the swallowed slights, the suppressed frustrations, they had forged something within me. A quiet, unyielding resolve. As she spoke, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't the calm of acceptance, but the sharp, focused clarity of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. The heat of her anger, the venom in her words, only served to freeze my emotions into an icy resolve. That afternoon, I didn't call her. I didn't send a text. I didn't even acknowledge her furious voicemails. I went to the small, discreet office of the solicitor who had handled my father's will. His name was Mr. Davies, a man of quiet competence and a reputation for discretion. He had a neatly ordered desk, the faint scent of old paper and lemon polish, and eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Davies, I began, my voice steady, I need to discuss the terms of my father's estate. Specifically, the clauses pertaining to the upkeep of the family home. I laid out the situation, not with emotion, but with cold, hard facts. The agreement, loosely formed but legally binding in spirit, was that I would manage the estate's financial obligations for the duration of her occupancy of the house, ensuring its preservation and my mother's continued residence. I presented him with copies of all the mortgage statements, the utility bills, the receipts for the repairs I'd personally overseen. And then, I showed him the crucial document. It was a separate agreement, drawn up and signed by my father and myself, 2 years prior, shortly after his diagnosis. It was a contingency plan. In the event of my mother's financial mismanagement or any action that threatened the integrity of the estate, such as defaulting on mortgage payments or making unauthorized expenditures that jeopardized the property, I was granted the full authority to take immediate and decisive action, including the sale of the property to ensure its preservation and the fulfillment of my father's wishes. He had anticipated this. He had known her. He had prepared for this. Mr. Davies read the document carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up at me, a glint of professional admiration in his eyes. "This is thorough," he stated, his tone understated. "Your father was a wise man." "He was," I agreed, the words thick with unshed tears, but my gaze remained fixed on the solicitor. "And I intend to honor his wishes." The execution was swift, precise, and utterly silent. No confrontations. No dramatic pronouncements. I authorized Mr. Davies to initiate the legal process to sell the house. The proceeds, as per the contingency agreement, were to be placed in a trust, managed by Mr. Davies, from which my mother would receive a modest, but guaranteed, monthly allowance sufficient for her needs, but preventing any further financial recklessness. The remainder, after covering the legal costs and any outstanding debts incurred by her actions, would be distributed according to my father's primary will. The first indication she had that things were irrevocably changed wasn't a shouted argument or a tearful plea. It was a registered letter, delivered by a stern-faced courier, informing her of the initiation of sale proceedings for the property, along with a detailed breakdown of the trust fund established in her name. I didn't witness her reaction directly. But the silence on her end, when she finally managed to choke out a call to my aunt, was deafening. My aunt, bless her gossipy heart, called me, her voice a mixture of outrage and bewilderment. "What have you done? Your mother is beside herself. She said you've thrown her out. She said you're a monster." I listened calmly, the sound of her frantic voice a dull hum in the background. "I haven't thrown anyone out, Aunt Carol. I've ensured the house is taken care of, and that mother has a secure allowance. Something she clearly couldn't manage on her own. But the house. She loves that house. Your father would never have wanted this. My father wanted the estate protected. He wanted his wishes honored. And I'm doing exactly that." My voice was as cold and clear as a winter sky. The flying monkeys, as they are so aptly called, were numerous. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent passive-aggressive texts. Distant relatives offered unsolicited advice and thinly veiled accusations. My mother's bridge club buzzed with her exaggerated tales of my cruelty. It was a storm of indignation, all aimed at me. But their words bounced off me, lacking the power to penetrate the quiet satisfaction I felt. The true satisfaction, however, came later, from observing the ripples of her downfall. She, who had always operated under the illusion of her own financial solvency, now had to contend with the reality of a limited, managed income. The lifestyle she had so carefully curated, built on the back of my efforts and my father's legacy, began to crumble. The designer handbags were replaced with discount store alternatives. The frequent trips abroad ceased. The constant stream of new investments dried up. She tried, for a while, to maintain appearances. But the hollowness of her situation was evident to anyone who looked closely enough. The entitlement, once a shield, became a glaring spotlight, highlighting her dependence and her inability to adapt. Her smugness evaporated, replaced by a desperate, often pathetic, attempt to garner sympathy. I saw her once, about 6 months later, at a local supermarket. She was wearing a sensible cardigan, pushing a cart laden with budget-friendly staples. She caught my eye, and for a fleeting moment, the old hauteur flickered. Then, it died. She averted her gaze, her face a mask of shame and something akin to fear. The fury that had once consumed her was now replaced by a hollow silence. The Dublin piece, as I've come to think of it, wasn't about victory. It was about equilibrium. It was about dismantling a carefully constructed house of cards, built on manipulation and expectation, with methodical precision. It was about reclaiming my own peace, a peace that had been systematically eroded for years. There were no fireworks, no grand pronouncements of justice served. Just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a job meticulously done, a debt finally, unequivocally, settled. And the silence that followed was the sweetest music I had ever heard.